34. Takuta awoke to the smell of coffee that drifted through the curtain into his underground sleeping area. He lay with his eyes closed in the darkness, letting the aroma kindle memories of other mornings and other places. He'd been introduced to coffee while in the home of someone not originally bred in the Draconis Combine, and became an instant convert. Tea, the Combine's traditional drink, had never had the same power over his olfactory sense. Now he sat bolt upright, fully awake. Ever since Busto had been in Arsenal's section, Takuta had been brewing his own morning beverage. He even looked forward to the task as one of those little things that let him slip from the prison of command to the freedom of domestic life. Now someone else was doing it for him again. It had to be one of the Tatate. He rolled out of the cot and slipped his feet into his armored combat boots. Crouched in the outer room was the Tatate who had adopted the desk commander. The figure was attentively watching the tiny personal cooker that each desk member was issued. The glowing fuel tablet cast a blue-green light onto the creature's face. So intent was the Tatate in waiting for the coffee to begin simmering, for the first tiny bubbles to appear at the edges of the cup, that he was unaware of the presence of the master. Takuta stood silent and still, not wanting to break the concentration of the neophyte chef. Getting it just right was an almost religious structure for Pita. Seeing the first bubbles appear, Pita whisked the cup from the burner surface with an excited, happy gurgle. His sounds were immediately answered by others from beyond the blackout curtain. There were scurrying sounds, and then the tiny room was suddenly full of other Tatate, all hopping and bobbing with excitement and happiness. The sound and movement stopped the moment they saw the desk commander, however. With screeches of consternation, the horde of Tatate scrambled backward through the curtain. Pita presented the cup of steaming coffee. Takuta accepted the proffered mug and settled into one of the simple chairs that stood beside the equally simple desk. Both chairs and desk had been constructed for him by the Tatate. He hadn't asked for them, just mentioned in passing one day that he hated the folding stool. That had been enough. The next day, a chair and matching desk had appeared in the headquarters. They must have quizzed the other desk members about the construction. The following day, a second chair had appeared. The Tatate were attentive to the desires of the commander, and equally attentive to the other humans. They seemed to have no sense of hierarchy and command, treating all the humans the same, like gods. Each of the humans had started out as an object of fear, which then changed to nominal acceptance and tolerance. When the Locust mechs had emerged from the dropship, that attitude had changed to reverence. Now the humans were literally objects of worship. All of them equally. The fact that Takuta was the commander was of no importance to the Tatate. That he was a human was enough and all there was. The business of equal worship bothered Takuta. Equality broke down the hierarchy of command, and the commander wondered if he was going to affect his ability to control his people in the future. The problem hadn't come up yet, but the future was unknown. He would have to watch the others. The other humans had also acquired servants. At first, a Tatate would follow while one of the humans went about his duties. The little aliens were especially intrigued by the techs, who were able to open the skin of the great machines and dig through their innards. They had become disciples. More had followed. Now each of the humans had a personal entourage following him or her everywhere. It had started with the Tatate attending to their immediate needs, but it had become much more than that. Before long, the Tatate followers began rushing to serve the humans in every way. A human had only to make a chance remark and the little aliens would scurry to accomplish the mission. Takuta had once mentioned in passing that he liked the color and scent of the rose-hued drenket flowers that grew near the command bunker. The following morning, he woke to find the surrounding area covered with erengets that had been painstakingly transplanted during the night. It was too late to do anything about it now, but Takuta had been extra careful about casual comments after that. Takuta's troops were not so delicate once they discovered their power over the aliens. Dana Lost was a particular offender. After being assigned a position among some large rocks on the edge of the forest, Los had mentioned to his personal Tatate that he didn't like having one particularly huge rock directly behind the position. When the Tatate found that moving it was beyond his capabilities, he'd gone off to organize a large working party. After struggling with the outcropping for an entire day, the party had managed to remove the offending piece. No sooner was it gone than Los commented that he really would rather have it there after all. The Tatate had organized a second working party and labored to put the outcropping back in place. They did such a fine job that not a trace remained of either the removal or replacement. Los had been about to comment that, in reality, he would rather have the rock where they're gone altogether when Swall and Horg, followed by his own entourage, happened on the scene. The encounter was not entirely a chance one, however. Horg had watched the removal of the rock and then its restoration. When it seemed like Los was about to have the Tatate move the offending piece a second time, he decided to step in. Horg took Los aside and mentioned in his normal, soft voice that it was not right to abuse the Tatate's loyalty this way. Los had rebuffed him, saying that it was fun to see the little baker's work. Horg had pointed out that if Los continued, there might be serious repercussions. That wasn't exactly the word Horg had used, but he made it clear to Los that behaving this way could lead to serious bodily harm. Los had retired in a sulk, but the big rock stayed where it was. Holly Goodall, the Locust mech pilot, had come to Takuda with another problem. Like the rest of the DES team, she had her following. Though she'd gone about her business as usual, it was becoming difficult to move the Locust from place to place because of the number of aliens who clustered around its feet. She'd mentioned the difficulty to Takuda, but that was the extent of it. Then, one afternoon, Goodall had come to Takuda followed by a Tatate that was obviously an infant. Not just a juvenile, but a real infant. The little ball of fluff was probably no more than a year old. "Sir," said Goodall, "I have become a mother. I had nothing to do with it, and I'm not real happy about it, but the Tatate have decided that I should care for this child. What do I do now?" Takuda was nonplussed. Nothing in his years within the ranks of the Draconis Combine military had prepared him for this. Members of the Combine military forces did reproduce. That was only natural. Commanders were trained to deal with such events. But when a human soldier had a child, everyone enjoyed a certain lead time in which to prepare for the event. To have someone simply hand over a child for adoption was not the part of the training, nor was dealing with an alien child. The Combine didn't deal with aliens. No one in the Inner Sphere ever had. Colonization usually meant the settlement of a planet by humans. Takuda considered the dilemma of involuntary motherhood to be beyond him. He took the question to Dakoto, Dokepi, and Totito. The shaman, tribal hetman, and Dakoto, who acted as a spokesman, met with Takuda in the latter's headquarters. Takuda explained the situation, beginning at the beginning and working up to the delivery of the child to Goodall. By the time the meeting took place, Emmerdine Knight had also reported a child being delivered to his team. Both Goodall and Knight were trying to handle the situation, but both wanted to be relieved of the responsibility. Takuda explained all this to the three Tatate, who promised to take it to the full council and to the tribe. But the Tatate had problems of their own. The announcement of the new humans had spread throughout the woodland. Tatate visiting from other bands had come calling to see with their own eyes. They had seen, talked, and departed. It was not long before the other tribes began to arrive, at first in small groups, with the most mobile and strongest among the early arrivals. Then had come the mass of the tribes, with hundreds of Tatate now camped around the human position. By custom, the host tribe, that headed by Totito and Dokepi, was required to provide food and shelter. It was a task well beyond their current capabilities. When the council met to discuss the problem of the children, they invited Takuda to attend. That in itself was a signal honor. It would have been unusual enough for them to invite another Tatate from another tribe to attend a council. The presence of an alien was unheard of. The humans and Tatate had cohabitated the planet for 500 years, but this was the first time a human had ever attended a Tatate council. Takuda went with the expectation that he would be asked to speak, that he would be questioned about why the humans were there. That did not happen. In fact, Takuda never said a word. It all devolved on how the Tatate conducted their council meeting. Because the event was one of great formality, the Tatate's customary long orations became even lengthier than usual. The youngest member of the council, Pope, was the first to speak. She outlined the traditions of the Tatate from the very dawn of time. She spoke of the importance of the children of the Tatate. She spoke of the importance of the education of the Tatate. She spoke slowly so that Takoto, who was translating for Takuda, would not fall behind. She spoke of the coming of the first humans 500 years ago. She traced the development of that relationship stage by stage. She talked on and on. Takuda found the history interesting if slightly long-winded, but it seemed interminable. He began to wonder whether Pope would ever get to the point when she would arrive at the question at hand. Finally, after nearly 4 hours of straight talk, she mentioned the children and the humans. Then she sat down. Now, thought Takuda, they would ask him for his opinion. But they didn't. Another Tatate counselor rose and began to speak. He outlined the traditions of the Tatate from the very dawn of time. He spoke of the importance of the children of the Tatate. He spoke of the importance of the education of the Tatate. He spoke slowly so that Dakota would not fall behind in the translation. He spoke of the coming of the first humans 500 years ago. He traced the development of that relationship stage by stage. He talked on and on. Takuda began to lose it after an hour. At the end of 2 hours, his eyelids were sagging. By the end of the third, he was drowning in the talk. And still the second man went on. When that counselor was finally done, another rose in his place and began all over again. Takuda was not well versed enough in the history and traditions of the Tatate to understand that each of the speakers was describing different incidents and different tribesmen. He nodded off. Even his Bushido training could not keep him awake for the 18 hours of talk. The Tatate had the advantage. They could shut down half their bodies while the other half remained alert. They were built for just this kind of marathon. In the end, they made no decision that Takuda could determine, yet Dakota assured him that no more Tatate children would be delivered for adoption. The aliens would still continue to revere the humans, however. There was no way to change that. Takuda stumbled back to the headquarters bunker and collapsed into a profound sleep.